Yeah, I'm Steve DelBianco. I'm Executive Director of NetChoice. It's a trade association of leading e-commerce and online platforms. And for the past 10 years, I'm a member of ICANN's business constituency. And I think the last 5 years have been the Vice Chair for Policy in the business constituency. The announcement of the transition in the IANA functions really did trigger two really interesting reactions. The first was the affirmation by the U.S. government and Congress that it was really important to maintain the multi-stakeholder model and a free and open internet, with minimal control by governments. And I thought that was helpful. And the second thing it triggered was sort of unprecedented unanimity and consensus within the ICANN community when we had to react to management's imposition of a top-down structure on how to plan the transition. I've never seen the community come together like we did since the London meeting and saying, wait a minute, it's the community that ICANN was designed to serve. So the community should take charge of designing the way that we would transition the accountability of ICANN to the community. The accountability track probably should be a parallel track. In fact, the accountability of ICANN writ large should be on the same track with the IANA stewardship items of the naming, the protocols, and the numbers. But unfortunately, the way things worked out is that management began a track immediately on the IANA functions transitions. And it was only after the community came together and insisted upon a broader discussion of ICANN accountability that the second track was launched. The reason we're so focused on accountability in the broader sense is that we believe that the U.S. government's leverage over ICANN was solely a function of its ability to withhold the IANA contract from ICANN if ICANN had gone off the rails or failed to be accountable to the community. With the U.S. government's decision to relinquish that leverage, this is our last and only opportunity to impose accountability mechanisms so that the community can hold the board and management accountable to us. So we have to condense all of our fondest hopes for accountability structures and mechanisms into this one opportunity. Because after the IANA is transitioned, there is no more leverage to get the board to accept constraints and accountability mechanisms without the leverage of the IANA contract. When the transition was initially announced, many interests in Washington, but around the world, were very concerned about it. What does this mean? How have we answered all these questions about government capture, fiscal responsibility, scope creep, and mission control? All those questions, it would be impossible to answer all those questions as a stopping point for the transition. I fell upon stress tests as a way to pay attention to those questions, but proceed with the work. So the idea is the stress tests designed to ask tough questions about the new accountability mechanism should be understood as we design our accountability mechanisms, and then they should be used to analyze the mechanisms we come up with. If the mechanisms we have answer well to those stress tests, then we will have allowed ourselves to proceed on the transition instead of stopping it to answer questions that couldn't be answered. There was a call for accountability mechanisms so the community could hold the board accountable. Things like spilling the members of the board, approving a budget, approving a bylaws change, invoking independent reviews and reconsiderations. Those are mechanisms. The trick is we didn't know how to exercise those mechanisms in a way that we can hold the board to follow what comes out. Ideally, we do cross-community working groups all the time. We do affirmation of commitments review teams all the time. So what we had envisioned is a permanent cross-community working group. And if I say those words, nobody says, oh, that's a new entity. It isn't an entity above the board, but it's a cross-community working group. The trick is we need that cross-community working group to have the power to have its decisions be binding on the board. What is the legal mechanism by which this group of the community can hold the board to its decisions? I'm no lawyer. I'm a programmer and a businessman, but we need legal advice on how to do that. We were told early on that one way that it could work would be to open up the member structure that's already inherent in ICANN's Articles of Incorporation. And if those members can exercise these powers and hold the board accountable, then that may work for us. But there's no desire to create a new entity. But creating member structure may be the way in which the powers can be exercised by the community at large.